Hi folks, welcome to the Cannabis Corner. I'm your host, Kerry Burns. This week, President Obama is doing his Latin American tour, and just as he cut his trip short, he went ahead and wound it up in El Salvador. But before he left, he pledged $200 million of the United States money. Of course, we're having to borrow that from China, but he pledged $200 million to fight street gang activity and the so-called drug war there down in Latin America. Now, when you look at the numbers of street gangs that are down there in Latin America, the numbers that aren't in jail range around 20,000 people that are legitimately known as gang members. I'm sure there's a lot more, but these are active gang members, if you will. If you'd have just taken that $200 million and divided it up among those 20,000 guys that are so-called street gangs, each one of them would have had $10,000 each, which is probably about a year's salary down there in Mexico and El Salvador and places like that. In fact, it may be even 2 years' salary for some of the jobs, the lower poor jobs that they have down there. Now, if they can live a 2-year period there where we spend just $200 million, then wouldn't that be the solution there, that we could just pay them to go ahead and coexist and pay them not to do anything violent, not to do any drug distribution and all. But in order for us to be able to do that, we have to end this stupid drug war that is the cause of all these gangs in the first place. None of this stuff existed back before the Controlled Substance Act or the formation of the Drug Enforcement Agency during the Nixon administration. None of these gangs existed. Most of the marijuana that was coming from Mexico was done by mom and pop operations, small time. There were some people that were bringing large quantities over and all, but there weren't any organized cartels, and there certainly wasn't a big widespread amount of violence. All of this started with the implementation of the Drug Enforcement Agency and this war on drugs that they declared. And when you declare war, you're going to have casualties, and unfortunately, the casualty load in Mexico has been very, very steep, and most of it has been over to control the cannabis market here in the United States. If we had taken the $200 million that Mr. Obama pledged, even though we have to borrow that money from China, if we'd taken that $200 million and set up just 20 hemp factories and allowed the people in those areas, in those impoverished areas, to work at these factories and stuff, we could have employed every one of those gang members, paid them an honest wage, teach them an industry that they know nothing about. They only know the marijuana side of it, which is nothing when you look at the entire hemp industry. The marijuana side of it is nothing. It's a few sentences in a giant volume of information when you look at the hemp industry and all the different products. But these people could be educated to not only the different products that could be made, they could be taught how to make them. They could be taught how to grow the hemp, how to process it. There are so many facets of things that could happen for them, and also give them a future and a good enough paying job that they wouldn't want to come across the border here illegally into the United States, whether that was to smuggle marijuana or just to come over here to work for a better wage. They would have the money down there. They would have a job to stay in their homeland. And I'm sure most of these people don't really want to leave their families to come over here to look for something better. Most of their money gets sent back home anyway. What they don't use that they live on, they send back home anyway. So if they were able to get this wage there in their hometown, their homeland, they would stay there. And instead of spending $200 million, that's all that's going to do is arm a bunch of more policemen and more drug enforcement agencies and cause more violence with cartels, because all they're going to do, if the police get more guns and more weapons and more strategy, more computers, more whatever they use to fight, then the cartel's going to do the same thing. They have just as much money. In fact, they have more. And so you're not going to, dollar for dollar, you're not going to be able to match these people. Take the illegitimate drug money away from them. The cartels themselves will have to set up legitimate businesses, which will employ people. If we can't do that here in the United States, let's encourage it in these countries where we are fighting this so-called war on drugs. Even though the big part of it is occurring in America, maybe this will be an example, and we can quit wasting. Even $200 million doesn't seem like a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but when we have to borrow that money, and the fact that nothing comes of it except more death and more violence, we don't resolve anything. thing. Why do we keep doing that? All right, that just sounds real stupid. And, you know, how long do Americans want to be part of stupid? Why don't we take the $1.5 trillion that the hemp industry could put out there right now, legalize, end this war on drugs, go ahead and put this money into our economy, and you really will have the control that they're trying to achieve with all of this violence and murder and countless of billions and trillions of dollars being spent. If we put that into our economy, we wouldn't be in the shape we're in. We would have people working. We could teach people. There'd be so many facets of this industry that people could go into that could become a career choice for them. We don't have that in America anymore. There's just very few career choices, and most of those, if they're not in the medical field, they're so near-ended. There's no security in them anyway. So what we need to do, we've got to get this industry back mainstream and bring it into this modern day we've created. With all of our technology, everything we have, this is really the key to it all. And it certainly will end the cartels. It certainly will end the violence. And that's worth it if nothing else happens. But that's just the drop in the bucket. When we look at the amount of money that $1.5 trillion that this industry will promote just the first year, and then in subsequent years it's going to get more and more, particularly when this country becomes dependent on hemp oil that's grown here in this country and not foreign oil that's shipped in from all these countries that we're fighting right now. So let's do this, folks. The time has come for America to embrace the hemp industry. This was one of our original industries here that we founded here in the colonies that we brought over from Europe, and we need to bring it back. It is the answer. And I thank you for spending time in the Cannabis Corner. Thank you.